Welcome to the Loaded Goat. I'm Aaron.
I'm Chris, and this is the first time I've worn a hat on this call. So
on this podcast?
Yeah, that too. These aren't just conference calls. Do we record these?
People actually listen.
Got on. Welcome to Zoom conferencing.
People actually listen to these. I mean, we have some listeners. I thought you knew what this was all about.
Well, you know how Alan does like a live show? What if we did it just as a conference call where you and I get on and we just talk and then other people join? You get the little dings every so often. Randy can correct us real time. It would be everyone's worst work experience meeting, but we could say we did it, you know?
I mean, so we're doing it, and you get people calling in. We're like, we can't hear you. We can't hear you.
Who's on the call? Who's on the call? All right, just to summarize, we'll do a quick round robin of who's here. Okay, so we were just talking about scene one.
Oh, yeah, or just the most annoying things of everybody in their podcast, or not in podcasts, in conference calls. It's like, you know, every time somebody speaks, it's like, Bill Smith here. And we're like, we know, we see you, Bill Smith.
How did you? That name happens a lot to me.
Oh, does it really? I didn't know that. Yeah, okay. And then we have somebody who joined late and they say, did you ever speak about this? And I'm like, yeah, we touched base on this at the beginning. Well, I am stunned that you only brought it up at the beginning and you didn't bring it up later. I mean, all kinds of just annoying things. Yeah, I think the format we have is working for us.
The other thing I'd love is we can then say at the end, you know, you've been pretty quiet, Randy. Can you share some thoughts for throughout the call? You've been oddly quiet. It's like, I was quiet because I wasn't paying attention. I had nothing to share now.
Yeah. No, there have been times in meetings where I've just had to be like, I didn't catch that last part, which means I didn't catch the whole part. I mean, so, you know.
Just pretend to freeze and be like,
you know, I haven't had to do that because I really have been kind of a freelancer for most of the Zoom phenomenon. So I
went to your retirement party.
Yeah, I didn't retire. I started my own business. There's a bit of a difference. But I will say, I can't imagine like being on Zoom. I always wonder what it did to the era of multitasking. Because, I mean, on conference calls, you could just zone out and just do something else. Although maybe people just don't care.
If you're one of my clients, if I'm on a call with you, you get 100% of my attention. If you're not one of my clients and you're not listening to this, we can get a lot of stuff done during meetings.
Fair enough. You
just got to squint a little bit so people can't see your eyes move.
Fair enough. That's reasonable. So has any coworker in your experience bought another coworker of the opposite sex a pair of nylons as a present?
You know, come to think of it, no.
No, me neither. I've never experienced that in the workplace. But we get to talk about this on this show because today we're doing Opie Loves Helen. Before we dive into that,
right on the, you know, we knew exactly what was happening from that title. They didn't pull any punches for telling us what this episode was.
No, it was like we are telling you what this is about. Before we dive in, though, I just wanted to give a shout out. A couple of weeks ago, I had the fortune of going to Mayberry comes to Scottsburg, which is in Scottsburg, Indiana, where I got the chance to meet a lot of people in person who we've had on the podcast, including Randy Turner and Alan Newsom.
First of all, how tall are they both?
You know, Randy is really tall. And Alan's pretty tall, too.
Okay. All right.
I was very short.
No one's surprised by that. Why was it in Scottsburg?
So one of the tribute artists who does Mayor Pike, he's also in the movie Mayberry Man. His name is Eric Overly. He actually is from Scottsburg, and he pushed to get this festival set up, and the town bought in. I mean, we were there. Mayor Terry Amick and his wife, Pam, were there the entire time for all of the events.
Pam's the best.
Oh, yeah, she is. But I know you don't know her. But yes, they're very, very, very nice. And I got to meet Randy in person and got to watch him interview Karen Knotts and Dixie Griffith. You know,
now, are they related to Don Knotts and Andy Griffith?
Funny you should ask that. They are their daughters. Yes.
Which one's for which?
I'm going to let you figure that out on your own. But Randy told me, with the exception of going to, where is it y'all go to?
Me?
You and Randy.
Oh, we go everywhere. Our next trip is to Tulsa, Oklahoma.
What are you going to Tulsa, Oklahoma for?
See the country. I have a theory that Tulsa is probably the most beautiful country or city in the world. And we don't know till we go, you know?
I've been to Tulsa. It's not the most beautiful city in the world, but I appreciate the thought. But now Randy said, with the exception of traveling with you, it was one of his greatest experiences.
That means a lot. I mean, I'm tall, so Randy and I can do a lot of tall things together. So I understand why I'd be a little mismatched.
How tall are you? I'm 5'9". How tall are you?
I'm 6 foot.
Yeah. It's frustrating it's not frustrating. It's just, being surrounded by tall people.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So anyway, great event. I hope they do it next year. I encourage you to go if you're so inclined. And I say you in the general sense of the listeners as well as Christopher.
Excellent. I'll lead a whole cohort. We'll be like Paul Revere running over with the whole squad.
Yeah, I'll believe that when I see it.
Costumes or jerseys? We'll have jerseys.
Jerseys. Okay. All right. So Opie Loves Helen. This episode first aired on September 21st, 1964. It was produced and directed by Aaron Rubin. And this was the last Tags episode he directed. And he went on.
I noticed that. Sorry, I'm going to cut you off because it's what I'm paid to do here.
By the way, do you have like a pet parakeet or something, or some pet birds just flying around?
We learned this a couple weeks ago. I get far better internet outside. So I'm sitting in our screen porch and there's a bird that's like really, really into the evening. Is it terrible?
No, it's not terrible. I just feel like it warrants an explanation.
Yeah, I feel like I'm like Cinderella and the birds are like helping me get dressed. Oh, is it normal that he produces and directs? I thought that end credit looked strange.
I mean, I think it varies by episode. I don't really know the story on why he produced and directed this episode, but then he did really go on to do Gomer Pyle and was kind of the showrunner for that after this.
Got it. Okay.
So before we dive in, this episode made me, when I'd watched it a few other times, it always made me a little uncomfortable. But when I watched it this time, I really didn't. I think part of the reason it made me so uncomfortable is because this is really an innocent thing on Opie's part. But there have been so many stories of teachers having inappropriate relationships with students that have come out, in my lifetime, in your lifetime. Yeah. And I think that may have just clouded my view of it.
I liked the episode till the very end. I thought it was fun, quirky, and it was sweet, right? Like, it wasn't like the nylons were funny, but it wasn't, I actually would like totally put that on the salesperson is like, hey, you're still selling nylons to like an 8-year-old boy. So
I have a thought on that when we get to it. Yeah.
Okay. So I would say that, but I didn't have the like general cringe factor of it other than the very end.
Yeah.
I think the bird flew away. It started to rain, I think he got wet, and so he went away. So things should be turning up.
I don't hear the bird anymore. So thank you for the real-time update on the bird.
Keeping you informed.
So we open with Helen lecturing on dances, and they are about to do the waltz, but Opie's partner Sharon isn't there, and I think Sharon may be his girlfriend.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Only like 3 people in the class danced.
That was something I noticed too. So Sharon's not there, so her brace got loose and she bet on it. But Helen tells Opie she will dance with him. But as we were watching this, I'm like, there's a kid sitting right there. Why don't they just dance? I mean, it was funny.
And also, like, so you zoom out and you see, like, there are a lot of kids, but when they're just showing the dancing, there's just one girl by herself.
Yeah.
The other piece is, we see Sharon later, and she doesn't have braces. So I like to think that she had like a leg brace that she accidentally bit.
You don't know. Yeah, that is a good point. I guess that was not a continuity issue there. Or maybe there's another term. Maybe it wasn't braces. Maybe there's something, if one of our listeners hears this, if there's a clarification of something that she would have bit on it in the 60s that we're not aware of, I would love to hear about it.
Yeah, please write a letter to the editor in your local paper.
Or you can hit us up on Facebook, which is an easier way to do it.
Or Threads. Are we on Threads yet?
We're not on Threads yet. I'm not opposed to Threads. I just haven't done it. And we're not on Truth Social either. So the only social media platform with a limited number of characters we're on is Twitter.
Good.
Yeah. So needless to say, Opie becomes smitten during this process of dancing with Helen. And I think it is one of those things where it's really, especially the way it kind of ends, I think he's always just kind of missed a mother figure in his life.
This is just classic wanting Gertrude. But the real issue here is that Andy isn't transparent with his son about this long-term girlfriend. He has been in the past.
That's a good point. And that's something to talk about when we get to the end too, because I have some thoughts on that as well.
I'm just ahead of the game across the board, baby.
I think you just want to get this over with. That's what I think you want to do.
Yeah. How many stars did you give it? How many whistles? I came up with the ranking. Well, I didn't. My wife did. And I literally say stars every time. I can never remember those whistles.
I know. But it's all good. We always get to the whistles. So Class is dismissed, but Opie comes up to Helen and wants to help her. He helps her with her sweater and helps her as she opens the door. And back at the jail, Barney is whistling and sweeping, and then he looks out the window and sees Opie walking with Helen hand in hand. And Barney comments to Andy how sweet it is. And it is. It is. And it's just
super cute.
Super cute. And then Barney says it's very different from when they were kids, and they meant to talk about being at war with a teacher named Mr.
Love this. This is funny.
This is so funny. Who was known as the Beast from the Fourth Floor, but they put a tack in her chair, ink in her thermos, and a garter snake at her desk, and they're like, yeah, she was so mean.
So mean.
I wonder why.
Did you ever troll any teachers?
I personally, not really. I mean, my mom was a teacher, so I was always sensitive to trolling of teachers. But I would always feel sorry for teachers, especially if they'd come fresh out of college and they'd end up with a bunch of 7th and 8th graders. And I don't know if 7th and 8th graders are pretty nasty. 7th and 8th graders, I think, are in a town where teachers coming in as a newbie, they're even more merciless because if it's somebody they didn't even know or didn't grow up around, they're even more merciless. Yeah,
that's like how it was with substitute teachers.
Yeah,
my mother was also a teacher, and I did troll a teacher once. We had a math teacher in sophomore year, and we thought we had like a good, friendly relationship. And one time he didn't show up like for the early period class, and the vice principal was there, and the rest of the class left, and my friend Steven and I were just hanging out there. And this man was very particular about how he wanted his bulletin board. And so with the vice president's permission, we like turned all of his boards, all the things on his board just off center and moved them around a little bit. And then from there on, I thought we had like a good joking relationship. And so he was really meticulous about like erasing every part of the whiteboard. So we'd like come in between class and write a little bit, and then he'd erase it again. And before I had him again, senior year, first class, like at the very beginning, he pulled us to another room and threatened to kick us out of the class before we even showed up.
Oh, really? So He did not like it.
He did not like it at all. And like they're all like, you look back too, like my friend Steven like brought an Xbox into class and played it while he was teaching one time on a TV. And, you know, I get it. I get where he was coming from.
It is funny. I mean, how old was this teacher?
He was 40s.
Okay. There is something I do find is that men in their 20s, especially if they're like coming back to high school, they almost try to get back and banter with the students. And sometimes the students are faster than they are, and they can't keep up with the insults. I mean,
eat them alive.
Yeah, they do. They do. I mean, it's not a good policy.
The other thing that was fun about this is he's like, I'll kick you out of this class before 8 a.m. This is also a class for juniors. You don't even belong. I was like, well, that's also true. That's a year behind.
Did you stay in the class or did you?
No, of course I did. I got an A. Okay. It was great. It was for a year younger.
But he's like, I'm not putting up with any.
I'm not going to take calculus. I'm going to take honors pre-calc. That's way better than calculus.
Fair enough. So Barney asks Andy when he's going to marry Helen. And it's just silly. And then Andy gets annoyed and asks Barney when he's going to marry Thelma Lou, and Barney storms off. And I mean,
this is another piece with continuity. We're like, we just went through this episode.
Yeah. So at breakfast, Opie asks Andy if it is okay for a boy to go with a girl who is older than he is. And Andy says it's fine, but he doesn't realize he's talking about, I figure Helen's in her supposed to be late 20s, early 30s. Is that kind of what you figure? Or?
Yeah, and I think they should have introduced the rule from How I Met Your Mother that's half your age plus 7.
That's
so Opie can only go with
a 12-year-old,
1 year younger. No, he can go a lot older, actually. It doesn't totally work with children. Well, no, God. Oh my goodness.
That's yeah. No, it doesn't. That's the whole point. It does not. That's why this episode kind of makes me a little uncomfortable at times. I'm with you. But by that rationale, Opie could only date the oldest Opie could date was a 12-year-old.
Yeah, but still, no. I'm rescinding all. None of this is okay. None of this is okay.
None of this is okay. We say that it's etched in stone. But Andy tells the story of courting Barbara Edwards, who was a little bit older than him, but he didn't care what people thought. And then Opie asks advice on how you lets this girl to know he likes her, and Andy kind of suggests buying a gift, but then is shocked that Opie wants to spend his entire savings, a whopping 74 cents on her, but he tells him to go ahead. And at the jail, Andy and Barney are discussing the gift, and Barney tells Andy about the time he splurged and took Thelma Lou out to dinner. to
This is a great
Morelli's.
scene. I love this.
Because they usually go Dutch. And he talks basically about how
What does that mean?
Dutch means Each pays their own way.
Okay.
I don't know how that term came up. I don't know
Because of the Dutch.
I don't know if the Dutch are notoriously cheap or don't take each other out to dinner. I don't really know what the story is there. But he talks about taking her out to Morelli's, but they didn't get the shrimp cocktail and they didn't want to fill up. And I tell you, there's two of the greatest suspensions of reality in TV are that any woman would want to date either Barney Fife or George Costanza.
Correct.
Especially not someone who's a catch like Thelma Lou.
Yeah. The Barney Fife Macarena.
Yep. Good point. All right. So at the women's clothing store, Opie comes in and says he wants to buy a present with his 74 cents. They look at handkerchiefs, but Opie is not happy with what he sees. They go through a lot of them, and the clerk is exhausted and working hard for this sale.
I've got a theory on this before you continue. This is how they know that they're going to switch over to color soon, and so they intentionally put you through a scene that makes no sense because there's no color. He's like, "How about a blue one? How about a red one?" And it just is gray, 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 gray.
So my theory on this: here's how a clerk sells a 10-year-old pair of nylons. He finally picks one. She's like happy to be done with this, but it's only 50 cents. And he wants to spend the full amount. She's like, fine, I've got something, but it's 80 cents. So he runs home and drinks 2 bottles of pop to pay for it. The only reason she's just so exhausted at that point that she doesn't even stop and think that she's selling a 10-year-old.
I can
nylons.
see that. I can see that. She's too busy folding handkerchiefs.
Yeah, a lot.
Preach.
A lot of handkerchiefs.
All right,
yeah.
I buy that.
So Andy comes into Opie's room later and sees the package. He gets Opie to open it and so he can see what he got.
Because he can fix it later. What a kid.
What a kid.
Nice kid.
Let me tell you something. If I wrap a present, that thing is never coming unwrapped again.
Correct. I won't even, there's this, some people like unwrap the paper casually so they can, reuse the paper later.
Yeah.
And I can't even do that.
No. I wouldn't even reopen an Amazon bag if I stuck something in it to give to someone. I would not. I'm like, no, the ship has sailed. You can see it when they do.
See the nylons when they're delivered to your girlfriend.
Which is going to happen anyway. You just, because you didn't really do the necessary groundwork or legwork on the front end. But it's a set of nylons, and Andy is disturbed and confused as we go to commercial.
Andy handles it well.
He does.
I liked this scene. This was funny.
And we are disturbed and confused too. But then before we go, now that we're in the break, just want to take a moment to say that this episode was produced by Pod Machine. They do great podcasts at a great rate. Go to podmachine.com to learn more and enter Loaded Goat at checkout for a 10% discount.
This episode is also brought to you by Spanx.
No, it's not. But thank you. Thank you. Spanx, if Spanx wants to
that would be the weirdest sponsorship we could get.
I mean, I don't know if it's the weirdest. I would have to say I did actually when I was in Scottsburg, Indiana. I did find it funny that I drove past one of the liquor stores there, and they had a shout out to Otis Campbell, and I thought that was pretty amusing.
That's great.
Yeah, it was pretty amusing. So after the break, Andy asks Opie who he is planning on giving this to, but Opie won't tell. But Andy explains that stockings are very personal, and Opie really just doesn't understand. And Andy just asks Opie to take the stockings back. He says, I'd like it if you take the stockings back.
Well, you know why they're personal. Have you ever worn nylons?
No.
Oh, well, they get so sweaty and like they get crunchy on the feet. It becomes like a gross sock pretty fast.
Have you worn nylons like when you've been doing Shakespeare, or when have you worn nylons?
Not doing Shakespeare, but doing other theatrical experiences.
Like what?
Oh, goodness. In Alice in Wonderland, I was like a dancing card that we wore black nylons. I've worn a lot of nylons.
I never have.
Oh, I'll buy you a pair.
I think I'm good. I don't know.
Gift's a gift.
I don't.
Gift is a gift.
Gift is a gift. A gift's a gift. I mean, actually, it's funny in Bull Durham. That's what he wears to get his control down as a pitcher.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Have you never seen Bull Durham?
No.
He's basically like all over the place. I mean, he throws like 102 miles an hour, but it's all, he hits everything. And Tim Robbins does. And so Susan Sarandon basically gets some nylons and a garter belt to help him control his waist and his movement. It's pretty funny. I would recommend if you haven't seen Bull Durham. It's a funny movie about minor league baseball.
Okay, I will do that. I just recently watched, speaking of older movies, I watched Thelma and Louise again on an airplane. So wonderful. I love that movie.
It's a very good movie. You have no idea how groundbreaking that was when it came out.
Yeah.
So back at the jail, Barney calls the diner to flirt with Juanita. You're just kind of like,
what a skis ball.
Well, you just are kind of like, you got Thelma Lou. Why are you doing this stuff? He's asking to take her to the drive-in at Mount Pilot, and he turns around, and Opie comes in and surprises Barney, who hangs up the phone. It is funny watching Barney do this. And I mean, he's always, we'll never see Juanita, and he's always going to flirt with Juanita, and it's a great bit, but it is just funny when, you just see, it is just kind of like, come on, you've got Thelma Lou at this point.
Correct.
Yeah. So Opie asks Barney how to tell a woman that he likes her, and Barney is uncomfortable, but he suggests 2 ways: playing hard to get, which Opie's not really crazy about doing, or being romantic with poems, and Opie's really not read any romantic poems in school.
Well, why didn't how he treated Sharon work, where he just didn't punch her in the face?
I mean, based on my experience, I feel like women want more than that. I feel like most people want more than that in a relationship.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. So Barney tells Opie to get the girl on the phone, and he will bring the romantic book of poems. Opie does, and Barney comes back with the book. And Opie gets Helen on the phone, and he recites the poetry to her. And it goes a little something like this. When you and I are far apart, I no longer live. My heart is bursting from within with all my love to give. Oh, that's so sweet. Helen is confused. For folks who are just listening, Chris put a little heart up in his monitor. Yeah, that's very nice. Yeah. So Helen is confused, and she tells Opie to come over immediately. And Opie runs off, and Barney is proud of himself because he thought he got basically set, Opie on the right track.
Yeah.
And then
Barney to the rescue.
To the rescue. And then Helen calls back, and Barney is flabbergasted and said he thought he was calling some kid at school. I mean, the look on his face of just the conversation, because we don't hear a word from Helen, but it is just great just watching him,
spin up. And he starts shaking.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And then in comes Andy, and Barney goes off on how it's all Andy's fault because he hasn't, done what he's supposed to be doing as a dad. And Andy explains that he knows Opie's got a crush on older girls, but then Barney tells him that it's Helen and how he made a big fool of himself. And then Andy ribs Barney on the romantic poems book. And Andy is slow moving, but ultimately decides he should go over there too. I mean, I think Andy, this is kind of like a moment of like, I'm not really mad at Opie. I'm kind of processing how I should handle this, I think is kind of what he's thinking.
Yeah, totally. And maybe you should have taken a little bit more time.
Yeah. Yeah. So at Helen's, she obviously refuses the stocking. And Andy comes in and sits the 3 of them down. And Andy explains that Helen is his girl. And I was thinking about this. There has never been a scene really where Opie and Helen Opie has seen basically Andy and Helen dating. Because even the one where Barney does the whole thing of they're about to get married and we've prepared this bedroom and the bridal suite and all that stuff, they'd send Opie over to a friend. So maybe he really...
No, it's a small town.
I agree.
Continuity.
I agree.
I just think that was such a weird choice. Like you could have just been like, hey, she's your teacher. Weird power structure. And then we'll talk about power structures and relationships from there. Maybe that's a little progressive for this time. But I just think going like, hey, she's my girl is like a weird precedent and thing to teach your son. Bailey's been like, all right, Helen, you pick. She's going to be like, all right, I picked the sheriff. She's cool versus this kid that can't even read.
It does remind me of that SNL skit where they did make fun of like a teacher where the guy shows up. You remember the show with Kate Mara, where it is about her having the affair with a student. There's a Saturday Night Live skit where a kid shows up and he tries to hit on his teacher, and his teacher's like, oh, did you really think this? Break this down. Are we hanging out where you got to pick me up on your bike? And, it's great. It's great stuff. So, I think one of the things with this is that I think he tried everything other than explaining really the legality, the birds and the bees, and all of the issues, which is probably out of bounds for this show, probably out of bounds for all shows of that period.
Yeah.
So he just tried to softly explain it to him. So the only thing he really can say that maybe son, you'll get it at this point. This is my girlfriend.
Mm-hmm. All right. I disagree, but okay.
That's fair. I mean, we can, we've both got our opinions. So Opie asks if they'll get married someday. And Andy says he really doesn't know. And then Opie says if she stays in the family, she doesn't care if Helen is his wife or his mother, which is charming and just kind of odd too. But it's all's well that ends well. And we go to commercial. Mm-hmm. So in the epilogue, the class is square dancing before Helen dismisses them.
Not the whole class, just part of the class.
Part of the class. Are you upset that I didn't agree with you?
No, I just hate you.
You hate me. What do you hate me for?
I'm just kidding.
All right. So Andy comes in and Opie runs up and asks Sharon if he can carry her books. And she says no because Johnny Paul said that he liked Miss Crump. And to your point on this, there is a distinct possibility. Johnny Paul would have told Opie that Helen Crump and Sheriff Taylor were dating.
Yeah, for sure.
So, all right, I'm going to grant you that. I'm going to grant you that there is no way Opie would have gone without finding out. I am going to say I can understand Andy's approach given the time period.
Yeah, I agree. I seem to be like living through a tornado right now. So if it gets loud and scary, that's what's happening. No, but I like the ending. I thought it was really cute. Like, can we go to your house? I'll carry your books. I like how Sharon sasses him. That's great.
Yeah. Opie then gives the poem that he did. And Opie says him like in Helen Crump was yesterday. And today's today. And then he recites the poem. And that does the trick as we close.
But I love that that's good. It's like, oh, baby, that was yesterday, baby. I love you today.
I mean, that is kind of like, oh, baby, come on. I mean, I wouldn't lie to you.
I love you, baby.
I love you. So that's basically it in a nutshell. How many whistles would you give this?
I give it 8. It was fun. I didn't like, clearly parts I didn't like, but it was a fun episode. 8.
I agree. I'd go 7. Any final thoughts?
No, love the Opie at the beginning of the season. Those are always great.
Oh, always good.
Little boys growing up.
Well, I hope you're safe. I hope you don't get blown away by a tornado.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Well, thanks for listening, folks. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. And if you think about it, subscribe. Next week, we'll do Barney's Physical. Until then, Christopher, whenever you and I are far apart, I no longer live. My heart is bursting from within with all my love to give.
Tweet, tweet, tweet.